Hi everyone, Bleepthany Blooptano here, the internet's busiest music nerd, and it's time for a review of the new King Gizzard and the Lizard Wizard record, The Silver Chord. This is a new full-length LP from Australian psych metamorphosists King Gizzard and the Lizard Wizard, dropping their second album this year, which for them feels like light work at this point. 2 King Gizzard records within a year's time is like a walk in the park, considering that last year they dropped 4 albums, 3 of which came out in 1 month. Then rewind even further back to 2017 when they actually completed a commitment to release 5 albums within 1 year. But no, just 2 albums in little old 2023. And they couldn't be more different in tone, but also more similar. Let's rewind back to June when we got the album Petro-Dragonic Apocalypse, or Dawn of Eternal Night and Annihilation of Planet Earth and the Beginning of Merciless Damnation. A metal album that very much felt like a callback to another high point in the band's discography, that being Infest the Rat's Nest. Also a metal record, the band's first at the time, which saw them mostly embracing thrash metal riffs and grooves as a means of telling this very dismal and dark tale of ecological annihilation, with the rich planning to hightail it off to another planet because they messed up this one. And Petro-Dragonic is, again, a metal album, and also one with a story of environmental apocalypse, but this time with monsters, dragons, witches. Don't want to spoil the whole thing. Now, sonically, this is not what the Silver Chord is going for at all. This is actually the band's first full-throated attempt at doing something they had been flirting with for a while, making an electronic album. And they've pointed in this direction before previously with tracks such as Psy Boogie or the very synthy Butterfly 3000 record, but never have they committed to the bit in the way they have on the Silver Chord, because here we don't just get synths. We're getting a lot of beats, a lot of effects, a lot of vintage sounding electronics. We're throwing it back to techno and progressive electronic music, krautrock as well to a degree, some touches of electro disco too. And as I've said earlier, this project is vastly different from anything King Gizzard has done before, but also very similar because apparently there are a bunch of musical and lyrical callbacks to Petro-Dragonic Apocalypse laced within this project. It's also very much a tale of extinction in its own way too, but also unlike Petro-Dragonic, this record is kind of difficult to sum up, because while the 7 tracks on this thing do segue into each other pretty smoothly, the overall experience they create is a little lopsided, especially when you consider there are 2 versions of the album, one 28-minute regular version, and then a version of extended mixes that total up to 90 minutes in length. The opener THEIA, for example, goes from the shortest track on the LP at 3 minutes and 24 seconds to the longest at over 20 minutes. And honestly, the state it's presented in under 4 minutes, is barely sufficient as a tone setter, in my opinion. It's kind of a mild, progressive synth jam with some pumping kicks, repetitious refrains that hypnotize in much the same way many a King Gizzard chorus does, but with much more enthralling instrumental backing on previous records, I will add. The band, I will say, does hit an eerie stride on the title track though, which is topped with these mangled, warped, robotic lead vocals that are giving almost Kid A vibes, but are somehow more cinematic. Honestly, it's a great highlight, one of the most otherworldly pieces the band has ever made, but the momentum of this record gets somewhat lost in the very odd set, which at a few points sounds a bit too overeager to come off like a macho Eurodance anthem, especially with all of the gruff rap shouting toward the end. This is something the band tries to employ again on the song Gilgamesh, and it doesn't sound much better here. In fact, it feels even more out of place against the throaty chants of Gilgamesh. Things don't get much better on Swan Song, where the Eurodance vibes return once again, but the dark chords and rough vocals and kind of morbid lyrics also leave it feeling like it's a cross with a Rammstein or a Rob Zombie song, and the whole experience comes off as maybe a bit too kooky to take as seriously as as the material on Petrodragonic. One positive I will throw in, though, is that I really like the retro-futuristic electronics on the track CHANG'E. Honestly, I think dialing it back aesthetically to something much further in the past, as far as electronic music goes, works much better for King Giz. The cultish vocal passages hit much harder with this kind of instrumental backing too, which I would also say is the case for the song Extinction, the closer, which feels like a psych electronic anthem in tribute to a deadly vampire cult. But I will say, with it being presented in the fashion that it is in the regular version of the record, it does feel a bit neutered. The climactic finish isn't quite there. Knowing there's a 12-minute extended version of this on disc 2 kind of makes me feel like I'm just hearing a preview, which does leave me wondering, was there somehow a happy middle ground between these two records here that could have been discovered and dug into and it just wasn't? Could we have just gotten a version of this track that doesn't contribute to a 90-minute runtime but also doesn't feel like it got cut off prematurely? Not that I would want to destroy the explorative little synth odyssey that we get on this cut, but here's the issue. While it's easy to praise longer versions of songs on the album that I already like, it's harder to feel jazzed about longer versions of songs on the record I'm not as much of a fan of or just think are okay. Because if I'm gonna have to hear set, 4 minutes is perfect. However, I do imagine some hardcore fans are gonna want to listen to these longer versions to at least pick up on some of the weird instrumental switch-ups or some of the other deeper Petrodragonic musical Easter eggs, like the chants of Gila! Gila! on Gilgamesh. The extended version of the title track actually offers some of the most interesting and radical shifts and changes across its runtime, because we get some mesmerizing, crazy-ass breakbeat dance beats on this one. I kind of wish I could take my favorite moments from disc 2 and just make my own record with them, because with this LP, unfortunately, King Gizzard gives us two options, neither of which are entirely fulfilling or satisfactory. You can either opt for the musical equivalent of a synopsis, or you can listen to the overly indulgent version that just drags on too long. And by not whittling and sculpting this album down into a version that hits harder and makes sense, I feel like the band is kind of putting that labor onto the audience. I'm feeling a strong 6 on this record. Transition, have you given this album a listen? Did you love it? Did you hate it? What would you rate it? You're the best, you're the best. What should I review next? Hit the like if you like, please subscribe, and please don't cry. Hit the bell as well. Over here next to my head is another video you can check out. Hit that up or the link to subscribe to the channel. Anthony Fantano, The Silver Chord, forever.